Imagine waking up in Italy. You step outside, walk towards the coast, and suddenly you're standing in front of water so clear and turquoise that it almost doesn't look real. White sand stretches along the coastline, huge limestone cliffs rise above hidden coves, small islands sit just offshore, and everywhere you look there are different shades of blue. This is Sardinia. Located in the Mediterranean Sea, Sardinia is one of Italy's most spectacular islands. But what makes it truly special is its coastline. From enormous sandy beaches to tiny coves hidden between cliffs, Sardinia seems to have a completely different beach around every corner. And with so many beautiful places to choose from, narrowing the list down to just 10 isn't easy. So today we are traveling around the island to discover 10 of the most beautiful beaches Sardinia has to offer. Some are easy to reach, some require a boat, some require a hike, and some have become so famous that access is now carefully controlled to protect them. We'll be traveling from the south of the island to the north, then back along the eastern and western coasts. And by the end of this journey, you might understand why Sardinia is often described as one of the Mediterranean's great beach destinations. So let's begin. This is my countdown of the top 10 beaches in Sardinia. We begin our journey in the south of Sardinia. Near the town of Chia, surrounded by dunes, Mediterranean vegetation, and some spectacular coastline, we found our number 10, Giudeu. At first, Giudeu might look like just another beautiful Mediterranean beach. But once you look closer, you start to understand why this part of Sardinia is so special. The beach stretches along a beautiful section of coastline where pale sand meets incredibly clear water. And just offshore, a small rocky island rises from the sea. From above, the contrast is incredible. The white sand, the turquoise water, the green Mediterranean vegetation, and the deep blue of the sea beyond. It almost looks tropical, but isn't the Caribbean. We are still in Italy, and that's one of the things that makes Sardinia so fascinating. You don't necessarily need to travel thousands of kilometers to find landscapes that look completely exotic. Sometimes they are right here in Europe. Giudeu is also the kind of beach where you can slow down. You can walk along the shoreline, swim in the clear water, explore the surrounding dunes, or simply sit down and watch the Mediterranean stretch towards the horizon. And for me, that's what makes a beach memorable. It isn't always about how famous it is. Sometimes it's about how you feel when you're standing there. And Giudeu has that feeling of space, of openness, of being surrounded by nature. But this is only number 10, and the beaches we are about to discover are going to become even more spectacular. So let's continue. For number 9, we are traveling towards Villa Simius in the southeast of Sardinia. And this beach has something that makes it different from almost everything we've seen so far. Flamingos! Welcome to Porto Giunco. When you first see Porto Giunco, your attention immediately goes towards the sea. The water is incredibly clear, the sand is pale, and the beach curves gently around the coastline. But turn around, and the landscape changes completely. Behind the beach is a lagoon and wetland environment where flamingos can be found. And I think that's one of the most fascinating things about Porto Giunco. You have two completely different worlds separated by a strip of sand. In front of you, the Mediterranean. Behind you, a lagoon filled with wildlife. It's almost as if nature decided to place a tropical beach directly beside a wildlife reserve. And this is something Sardinia does incredibly well. Its beaches aren't isolated from nature, they are part of much larger ecosystems. You can spend the morning swimming in crystal clear water and then turn around and watch flamingos moving through the lagoon. Porto Giunco is also a wonderful place to simply walk. The beach is long enough that you can escape the busiest areas and find your own little section of coastline. And when you look towards the horizon, it's easy to forget that you're standing on an island belonging to Italy. It feels like another world. And that's becoming a theme of this journey. Every time we think we've seen the most beautiful landscape Sardinia has to offer, the island gives us something completely different. At number 8, we are entering the Gulf of Orosei, and this is where Sardinia starts to feel almost prehistoric. Welcome to Cala Luna. Imagine approaching this beach from the sea. At first, you don't see much, just enormous limestone cliffs rising above the Mediterranean. Then the coastline begins to open, and suddenly you see the beach. A small crescent of sand surrounded by towering cliffs, and then you notice something else: the caves. Huge natural caves open towards the water. They create shade along the shoreline and make the entire place feel almost like a natural cathedral. You can imagine people arriving here centuries ago and feeling completely isolated from the outside world. And that's still part of the magic today. Cala Luna isn't simply somewhere you drive to for an afternoon. For many visitors, reaching the Gulf of Orosei is an experience in itself. You can arrive by boat, or you can take hiking routes through the surrounding landscape. And I think that's important, because when the journey becomes part of the destination, you remember the place differently. You remember the boat ride, the cliffs, the first moment you saw the beach, and sound of the water inside the caves. And suddenly, the beach isn't just a photograph, it's a memory. When you think about the most beautiful beaches in Sardinia, you probably imagine long stretches of white sand, turquoise water, and beaches packed with visitors. But what if the most beautiful beaches are the ones that most people never find? Hidden along the Costa del Sud near Teulada is a small beach called Spiaggia di Ferraxi. And this is not the kind of beach where you simply drive up, park your car, and walk a few steps onto the sand. Ferraxi feels different. It feels isolated, wild, and almost untouched. The beach itself is relatively small, stretching for roughly 100 meters, and it sits inside a rocky cove surrounded by Mediterranean vegetation. And perhaps that's exactly what makes it so beautiful. There are no enormous resorts dominating the landscape, no long rows of beach umbrellas, no huge promenade running behind the sand. Instead, you get rocks, wild vegetation, golden sand, and the Mediterranean Sea. The sand here is quite different from the fine white sand we saw at some of the more famous beaches. It's a coarser and golden in color, and as you move towards the water, the landscape becomes even more dramatic. The sea around Ferraglione can appear green, turquoise, and almost completely transparent. The seabed is largely rocky with some sandy areas, so this is the kind of place where the water itself becomes part of the adventure. Look underneath the surface and you begin to see another side of Sardinia. After discovering the wild and secluded beauty of Spiaggia di Ferraglione, we are continuing our journey along the southern coast of Sardinia. And this time, we are arriving somewhere that combines something I absolutely love about this island: beautiful beaches. With a little bit of history, welcome to Spiaggia di Monte Cogone. Located in the Chia area in the municipality of Domus de Maria, Monte Cogne is a beautiful stretch of coastline where fine, pale sand meets incredibly clear water. But the first thing you'll probably notice isn't the history, it's the color of the sea. Depending on the light and the depth, the water can shift between emerald green, turquoise, and deep blue. And because the seabed remains shallow near the shore, the colors become even more spectacular. The shallow water also makes Monte Cogne particularly comfortable for families, while further offshore, the clearer and deeper water attracts people interested in snorkeling and exploring the marine life. But there is something much more interesting happening behind the beach. Because Monte Cogogne isn't simply sitting between the sea and the land, it's sitting between the sea and the lagoon. And that lagoon is home to one of Sardinia's most beautiful birds, the pink flamingo. Imagine standing on the beach. In front of you, the Mediterranean Sea. Behind you, a lagoon where flamingos are feeding in the shallow water. It's such an unusual combination. You come here expecting a beautiful beach, and suddenly you are also watching wildlife. The lagoon isn't only home to flamingos either. Herons, coots, little egrets, and other resident and migratory birds can also be found around the wetland. So, for anyone interested in birdwatching, the landscape around Monte Cogogne offers much more than just a place to swim. Hidden between enormous limestone cliffs near the former mining town of Bugheru is a beach that almost feels like a natural shore. This is Cala Domestica. From above, you can immediately see why this place is so special. The coastline suddenly narrows. The cliffs rise on both sides, and deep inside this natural inlet, a small golden beach appears. It almost doesn't look like a normal Sardinian beach. It looks like the sea has carved its way deep into the land. And the result is this spectacular shelter bay. The white limestone cliffs surrounding the beach rise dramatically above the water. Some of them are covered in Mediterranean vegetation. Others are almost completely exposed rock. And together, they create this feeling that the beach is hidden from the rest of the world. Then you reach the sand, and suddenly the landscape changes again. The cliffs give way to dunes, the dunes give way to golden and pale sand, and in front of you, the Mediterranean Sea. The water here can shift from turquoise to deep blue depending on the depth and the light. And because the seabed is shallow and sandy in much of the bay, the water near the shore can be remarkably clear. So naturally. This is also a beautiful place to get into the water. Put on a mask, swim out, and suddenly the landscape continues beneath the surface. Fish move between the rocks, sunlight travels through the clear water, and the colors become even more intense. But there is something about Cala Domestica that makes it much more interesting than just another beautiful beach. Look around. Those ruins aren't random. This entire landscape has a story. For decades, Cala Domestica was connected to Sardinia's mining industry. Until around 1940s, minerals extracted from the surrounding mines were brought here and loaded onto the ships. And today, traces of that history are still visible. Old warehouses, storage structures, mining tunnels, and remains of the infrastructure that once connected the mines to the sea. It's almost like an open air industrial museum, except instead of being surrounded by buildings, you're surrounded by cliffs, dunes, and turquoise water. And I think this is what makes Scala Domestica so fascinating. You can stand here and see two completely different sides of Sardinia at the same time. One side, wild nature. The other, the industrial history that once shaped the lives of the people who lived here. For centuries, this coastline was valuable because of what was beneath the ground: minerals, metals, resources that were extracted from the surrounding mountains and transported towards the coast. And eventually, the sea became the gateway through which they left Sardinia. We are now down to the final four, and number four takes us back to the Gulf of Orosse. This is Cala Mariolu, and honestly, this is one of those places where you almost have to question whether the footage is real. The cliffs rise dramatically from the sea, the rocks are bright white, the vegetation covers the mountains, and below them, the water is an incredible shade of blue. The beach itself is also different from the long sandy beaches we've seen earlier. Instead of enormous stretches of sand, Cala Mariolu is famous for its pale rounded stones and pebbles, and the water is exceptionally clear. From above, the contrast is spectacular: white, turquoise, blue, green, all compressed into one tiny section of coastline. But there is something else that makes Cala Mariolu special. There isn't a normal road that takes you directly onto this beach. For many visitors, the easiest way to experience it is from the sea. You leave from one of the nearby ports. The boat travels along the Gulf of Orosse, and the coastline slowly reveals one cove after another. And this is when you realize something. The beach you're visiting isn't the only beautiful place here. The entire coastline is the attraction. Every few minutes, another hidden cove appears, another cave, another enormous cliff, another impossible shade of blue. And then you arrive at Cala Mariolu. You just jump into the water, and suddenly the entire journey makes sense. We've reached the final three, and for number three, we're heading back towards the southern eastern coast of Sardinia, near the beautiful town of Villa Simius. And this time, we're looking for a beach that almost looks too perfect to be real. This is Punta Molentis. The first thing you'll notice about Punta Molentis is its shape. A narrow strip of pale sand stretches between two sections of the Mediterranean, and from above, it almost looks like a tiny peninsula floating in the sea. On one side, the water is turquoise and shallow. On the other, the sea becomes a deeper shade of blue, and in the middle, a small stretch of sand separates the two. It's the kind of landscape that makes you understand why Sardinia has become so famous around the world. The water is incredibly clear, you can see the sandy seabed beneath you, And on a calm day, the sea almost looks like a glass. It's also incredibly shallow in some areas. You can walk into the sea, look down, and still see your feet beneath the water. And honestly, this is where you start to understand why people compare some Sardinian beaches to tropical destinations. Except, you're not in the Caribbean, you're in Italy. But Punta Molentis isn't only about the sand and the sea. Look around the beach and you'll notice something else: granite. Large granite rocks surrounding the coastline. Some are smooth and rounded, others rise dramatically from the landscape, and these rocks create a beautiful contrast against the bright turquoise water. The granite is one of the things that gives this part of Sardinia its particular character. The colors change depending on the sunlight. Sometimes the rock appear gray, sometimes pink, and sometimes almost golden. And when the sun begins to set, the whole landscape changes. The same beach that looked bright white and turquoise during the day suddenly becomes warm and golden. But there's something else I love about Punta Molentis: its location. The beach sits within the protected marine area of Capo Carbonara. That means the coastline around here isn't just beautiful, it's also ecologically important. Below the surface, the waters around Capo Carbonara contains rocky seabeds, seagrass meadows, and marine life. So when you're swimming through that crystal clear water, you're actually looking into a much larger ecosystem. This makes Punta Molentis particularly appealing if you enjoy snorkeling. You don't have to go far from the beach to start seeing the underwater landscape. The rocks continue beneath the surface, and the clear water allows sunlight to reach down into the shallow. But perhaps the most iconic view of Punta Molentis comes from above: the narrow beach, the turquoise water, the granite rocks, and the green Mediterranean vegetation covering the surrounding hills. We are at number 2, and this is probably one of the most recognizable beaches in Sardinia: La Pelosa. Located near Stintino in northwestern Sardinia, La Pelosa looks almost unreal. The water is incredibly shallow, the sand is pale, and the sea stretches through different shades of turquoise and blue. But there's one feature that immediately catches your eye: the tower. The historic watchtower standing near the shoreline gives La Pelosa an unmistakable silhouette, and behind it you can see the islands and coastline of the Asinara area. It's the perfect combination: history, nature, and an almost unbelievably beautiful sea. But La Pelosa also tells another story: the story of what happens when a beautiful place becomes too popular. This beach has become one of Sardinia's most photographed destinations, and because of that, access has been regulated to protect the environment. During busy periods, visitors' numbers can be limited and booking requirements may apply. So, if you're planning to come here, check the current rules before traveling. Because the goal isn't simply to see La Pelosa, is to make sure La Pelosa is still here for future generations. And when you look at this place, you understand why so many people want to protect it. The water is almost impossibly clear, the beach is surrounded by beautiful natural landscapes, and that little historic tower has been watching over the coastline for centuries. But if you thought La Pelosa was going to be number 1, there is still one beach left. And finally, number 1, Cala Goloritzé. Imagine hiking through the Sardinian mountains. There is no huge resort around you, no busy promenade, no rows of hotels, just rocks, trees, mountains, and the sound of nature. You continue walking, the landscape begins to change. The trees open, and suddenly you see the sea. Far below is a tiny beach surrounded by enormous limestone cliffs, Cala Goloritzé, and this is why I choose it as number one. It's not the biggest beach, it's not the easiest beach to reach, and it certainly isn't the most developed. In fact, that's exactly the point. Cala Goloritzé feels like nature has been left almost completely alone. The limestone cliffs rise dramatically from the coastline. The water below is crystal clear, and one of the most recognizable features is the enormous natural rock formation rising above the beach. It looks almost like something from a fantasy film, and when you see it from the sea, it's even more impressive. The beach itself is small, the surrounding landscape is huge, and that contrast is what makes Cala Goloritzé so powerful. And that's the end of our journey through some of the most beautiful beaches in Sardinia. From hidden coves and wild coastlines to turquoise waters, ancient history, old mining villages, lagoons, and beaches that look like they belong somewhere far beyond Italy. What I loved most while making this video is that every beach had something completely different to offer. Some were peaceful, some were dramatic, some were full of history, and others were simply places where you could stop, breathe, and enjoy the sea. Of course, Sardinia has so many more beaches than the ones I could fit into this video. So I'd love to know which one would you visit first? And if you've been to Sardinia before, tell me in the comments which beach you think I should have included. Thank you so much for watching and traveling around Sardinia with me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for the next adventure. Until then, ciao Sardinia!